And on BBC One now, here's Barbara Dixon and Penny Junor with The Afternoon Show.
Hello and welcome to this week's show. Today our special guest in What Price fame is the Irish singer and musician Mary O'Hara, and I'll be talking to her about her life and music. Vernon's quiz this week deals with stress, a very real symptom of today's hectic life, so have paper and pencil ready for that.
I can't see a man with his daughter. I can't see a man with his daughter on his knee without wanting to rush out of the room or run away from wherever I am. Because it sickens me, it disgusts me, and that isn't a healthy attitude to take at all.
Susan is a casualty of incest, that most secret and shameful sexual experience of all, and we'll be taking a close look at the subject, some of its victims, and the ways in which they have survived it later in the programme. But first, we take a look at an advance in medical science, which could turn congenital hip dislocations, often known as clicky hips, into a painful disorder of the past. Our reporter, Kate Kinnanmont, has been to Musgrave Park Hospital in Belfast to find out more.
Congenital dislocation of the hip is a condition we don't understand very well. The diagnostic problem is one where the doctors don't recognize it at birth. The condition develops over the next few months, and then it isn't recognized until the child is maybe a year, 2 years, up to 5 years old. If it's not diagnosed at birth, then the children go through a very difficult time in treatment. There's a lot of hospitalization, traction, treatment and plaster, multiple operations. They certainly have limps, and there's no guarantee of a normal hip even after some quite sophisticated treatment. So it is very difficult when we get a child with dislocation of the hip after the walking stage, because we do a lot of operations on them to try and get them a normal hip. But the hip doesn't really develop normally. It develops fastest around birth and slows up very soon after that. So around the walking age, if they're diagnosed, they have a lot of operations. The operations are successful, but they don't produce a normal hip. And very often these children have got arthritis by their teens and certainly into their early 20s. Many of them are having operations for their arthritis aged 30 and certainly by the age of 40.
When I came out of hospital, I was wearing calipers. Then I was well enough later on after treatment. I was able to go to ballet classes. I played hockey. And I really was fine until I was about 11 when I developed arthritis then in both hips. And at that time, I was taken to a specialist and had 8 operations then to try and... each operation appeared to be successful at the time, but the effects only lasted for a little while, and then I was having pain again, and the operations had to be done again.
The breakthrough at Musgrave Park Hospital has been to make diagnosis much more accurate by the use of computers. Up till now, the hands of a doctor were the only instruments used for testing, and 2/3 of the children were diagnosed late. The research team here visit maternity hospitals throughout the province to test new babies, and children at risk are referred to the hospital's clinic for regular monitoring.
When the baby comes in, history will be taken from the baby to inquire about maybe SIBs who have had congenital dislocation of the hip. We will interview the mother about her pregnancy and about the delivery, because it's important to recognize an at-risk group. Having done that, then we would examine the baby, and this is done by the nurses in the unit. The standard tests are carried out just as they would be anywhere else, but we attach little sensors to the baby's pelvis, and these little sensors detect the sounds that are produced within the baby's hips. When the tests are carried out, sounds are made. The sounds are then displayed on a television screen or whatever. The tester then can see exactly what has happened during their test. And of course, with the computer, they can have a hard copy of that signal and know in months hence exactly what had happened at that particular time.
The two patterns that we're interested in are both very different, both in size and in length. And we can recognise from that whether it's a click, which doesn't mean anything, or whether it's a sound from an unstable hip.
Once you've detected an unstable hip in a baby, what's your next stage? What do you do then?
I would refer the child to the orthopaedic clinic to be seen by one of the orthopaedic consultants, and the child will then commence treatment in a nappy splint, which they'll remain in for approximately 3 to 4 months. Babies born with unstable hips, if they're not treated, the hip will remain out of joint, so it's very important that they're put in some kind of splint that will hold the head of the femur in joint and thus cause normal development of both the head of the femur and the cup in which it lies in. And this is the idea of the nappy splint, that it holds the legs out in a type of frog position and encourages normal development. And once the child's legs have remained like that, out in frog position for a matter of days, they will then remain like that. When the mother is changing the nappy and she doesn't have any problem of having to move the legs out every time, the child's legs will naturally lie in that position. Okay, Ms. Godfrey, Mr. Godfrey, both children's hips are fine, but because of the family history, we'd like to keep a close eye on them, and we'll be sending for them again in about 4 months' time when they both should be up and walking. If you're worried at any stage, feel free to get in contact with us and we will see them again if there's anything at all that you're worried about. Initially, I would like to make people more aware, parents more aware of what to look for with children, and to reinforce with them the fact if there's any family history. It's very important that these children are followed up and not left until they're limping before they're brought in. And I'd also like to make medical people more aware of the importance of listening to mothers and any worries that they have about their child and following them through and not pushing them off as fussy parents. I think it's very important that we realise that mother does know best and will realise when there is something not right with her child.
Well, actually, I was born with a dislocated hip myself, and I have another daughter, and she had an X-ray at 3 months, and she wore a splint nappy for approximately a year. So I find it very reassuring to bring my twin daughters along to be screened at this clinic, where I know every stage of their development is being assessed, because I wouldn't really like them to go through the pain and discomfort that I have suffered in the past.
With me in the studio is a general practitioner who also has a background in computing and electrical engineering. Dr. David Ferguson, welcome to the afternoon show. David, we've seen computers used to diagnose hip complaints. How widespread is this use of computers?
Use of computers in medicine is now very widespread. I think this was a very good example of the use of a computer as an expert system.
Is it all diagnostic?
Largely, the diagnostic uses of computers are restricted to very specialised situations like this. Our own particular field, general practice, is at the moment, I think, too wide to consider a diagnostic computer.
What do you use a computer for in your general practice?
We use ours for much simpler, much more specific tasks relating to the practice office. We look to the days when we will be undertaking more preventive medicine, and the computer is going to help us. It does help us at the moment, keeping track of the very many tests that one can do in this situation. We also use it to keep track of patients who are on long-term medication, a very big part of the general practitioner's job. An average practice of perhaps 10,000 patients, a practice can have perhaps 1,500 patients taking regular long-term drugs. For any doctor to keep track of these patients, to be aware of whether they're taking them correctly, taking them wrongly, turning up for review consultations at the surgery at the correct time is extremely difficult. It's a very simple task for a computer to do this. And perhaps the principal use of the computer is to monitor the long-term medications of the patients.
And repeat prescriptions?
And that's what I mean by repeat prescriptions, yes. Long-term medication is supplied both at review consultations in the surgery and by the computer between times, the computer monitoring that the patient is taking the medicine correctly and ensuring that they have turned up when required for a review consultation.
Is there any fear that the patient's confidentiality is going to be lost if you have all their details on a computer?
Yes, a very real fear, understandable fear. But I think we have solved this in part. Nowadays we have modern small computers which can reside within the practice surgery itself. 10 years ago we would have required a terminal to a mainframe computer where the information would have been stored outside of the practice premises. Now that information is stored within the practice. It sits beside the paper records. All of the information on the computer is held on the patient's paper records. Therefore, we feel there's no loss of confidentiality. Information being released is released on the same basis as before, with the patient's permission.
Can you see a day when computers will ever take over completely?
Well, I hope not, before I retire. I doubt it very much. I've been around computers now for perhaps 15, 17 years. There has been very little movement in the direction of taking over from doctors. I can see how they will become increasingly more valuable to doctors. I don't really envisage the day that a patient will present to the surgery to be faced with a computer, no.
David, thanks very much indeed. And now over to Vernon for the quiz.
The word stress is probably one of the most overworked words in the English language. We tend to use it as an excuse and an explanation for anything and everything. The truth, however, is that stress in all its forms is a major cause of illness these days. It doesn't matter what the cause of the stress is. It can be hassle at work, unemployment, money problems, frustrations, or just plain old-fashioned boredom. The consequences can be very damaging. So this week's quiz is particularly important. I want to help you find out just how much stress affects you and whether or not stress is likely to be making you ill or to make you ill in the future. Have you got your pencils and paper ready, Penny?
Yes, sir.
Barbara? Right. Just answer yes or no as usual and keep a record of the number of times you answered yes. Question 1. Do you ever lie awake at night worrying about things that have happened or are likely to happen? Question 2. Do you ever feel panicky if something important is happening or if you're worried about something, job interview or anything like that? Question 3. Do you regularly use tranquilizers, drugs like Valium, for example? And question 4. Do you find it difficult to relax? Barbara, you're in a high-pressure business. Do you find it difficult to relax?
Yes, fairly difficult, yes. I can't really do anything that would keep me relaxed most of the time. I have to keep trying new things.
Have you ever tried anything for long enough? Have you ever tried anything for more than a few times?
No, well, I've tried all sorts of things from yoga to Chinese martial arts, but I always sort of give it up in the end.
Oh, the problem with learning to relax, of course, is that it's a bit like learning to play golf or learning to dance. You've got to stick at it. Anyway, better get back to the quiz. Question 5. Do you think you're under too much pressure, or do you think you have too much responsibility? Question 6. Do you worry a lot about what people think? Question 7. Do you get irritable a lot? Question 8. Are you often annoyed by noise, by particularly bad noises like pneumatic drills and people banging dustbins and car doors and having radios or televisions on very loud? Question 9. Do you get easily frustrated by things that break down? Penny, do you get annoyed by
Yes, I do.
Washing
I hit
machines
them.
and husbands that break down?
Not husbands, washing machines.
What do you do with them?
Hit them.
Ah, very good.
Makes
very
me feel
good.
a lot better.
Well, if you hit the things and it makes you feel a lot better, you can put no there.
Can
as
I?
a special concession.
It doesn't do a lot of good
No.
to them, though.
No, well, who cares? Question 10. Do you have any problems such as indigestion, asthma, eczema and so on, which are made worse by pressure? Question 11. Do you drink more than you should? And you've got to be honest. Right. Last question. Do you ever feel like packing it all in and running away? You've got to be honest again. Well, how'd you get on? The more times you answered yes, then the more susceptible you are to stress and the more stress is affecting you, the more it's likely to affect you. If you scored more than 5 yeses, then it really is having a fairly devastating effect on you. And I should point out, by the way, that it isn't the amount of stress you're under that's important, so much as your response to that stress. Barbara, what did you score?
4 yeses.
Oh, that's all right.
And I
Good.
told the truth, I think.
Well, that's not bad. That's pretty good. Penny?
If I can count my no for the inanimate objects, I scored 3.
Well, you're both obviously not particularly susceptible to stress, and you're both obviously able to cope with it. A lot of people do suffer. And there are lots of ways that you can learn to cope with your stress, but one of the first things you must do is actually be aware of the early warning signs that show you that stress is affecting your body. Things like not being able to sleep, getting irritable, not being able to remember things, getting physical problems like indigestion or asthma or eczema. These things are often made worse by stress. If you think that stress is affecting you, then there are things you can do to help yourself. You can, for example, get rid of your aggressions. Go and break some old plates in the garage or down the garden, or just go and hit a squash ball or a tennis ball. You can learn to relax. And learning to relax physically is not as difficult as a lot of people think. You don't have to shave your head or go around in saffron robes up and down Oxford Street selling old LPs. You can learn to relax by going to evening classes or by finding books from the library. Thirdly, you can learn to relax your mind. Daydreaming is a particularly good way. It's fairly simple. It doesn't take much to learn how to do that. Get yourself a rocking chair. That's pretty good too. Rocking chairs are a pretty old-fashioned. Old granny used to have one, but it was a very good way of relaxing. It's a sort of wooden Valium, and it works very well. Just a few hints. Anyway, there are lots more things you can do, and if you, as I say, if you go to the library or have a word with your doctor, he'll probably be able to help you, but it will help you a lot in the long run. That's all I've got time for this week. See you next week.
Our guest this week was born in the west of Ireland, became a singing star at home and abroad, fell in love and married and seemed to have everything. But she did not live happily ever after because her husband tragically died, and she went on to spend 12 years as a nun before once again becoming an international name in the music world. Mary O'Hara, welcome to the afternoon show.
Thank you, Barbara.
Mary, when you were a young girl in the west of Ireland, you were very talented musically. Did you want to become a musician professionally then?
No, at no point then or later did I decide that I would be a professional musician. But I had this gift, and it started to sort of exercise itself, if you know what I mean, in spite of me. And in the early days at school, I was winning competitions, and then I was approached by Radio Éireann to see would I do some radio programs that didn't have television then, late 50s. And it just sort of grew from there. Then it turned into television, and I went off to the BBC and hence to other parts of the world.
Now, when your husband did tragically die, you went on with a very successful career for some time, but then you decided to go into a monastery and take up that sort of life.
Yes.
Why did you decide to do that?
Well, it was a very strong call, really, and I'm using sort of technical language now, and it was something that I felt I really must do. It was a very strong conviction I had that this is the course my life should take, and a major ingredient in it was, in this call, this vocation, was gratitude, because I had an enormous happiness. And I noticed when you said at the beginning, Barbara, that she did not live happily ever afterwards. Well, if I may, I'll just make a small correction there, because I am by nature a very happy person. I have a happy disposition. I'm blessed with that. And I had enormous happiness in my married life. And then I had tremendous contentment in this monastic life that I pursued, thinking to be there for life. But I had to come out, and I'm now happy again doing
What made you leave that life?
Very simple. My health broke down.
Was that something to do with the regime?
Partly, but I think more to do with my particular temperament. I'm a bit of an extremist. When I do something, I go the whole hog, you know.
What made you turn back to music again?
The need to earn my living, Barbara. I mean, it was what I did before successfully. And although I was not looking forward to going back to becoming a singer, it was the most logical thing to do.
And have you kept in good health since you gave up your monastic life?
Thank God, yes, I have. I live very sensibly. I find that I aim to have a very balanced sort of life, because I think it's very important, and you would know this yourself as a singer. It's terribly important to have basic things like fresh air, exercise, proper health foods, and that sort of thing, because it's a very strenuous, demanding life, isn't it? And you've got to be as tip-top as you can be physically.
And speaking of your hectic life, what are you doing now? What are your plans?
Well, at the moment I'm scrambling to finish my third book, and I'm now 2 years beyond the deadline, but hopefully I'm getting it done now before spring ends. That should be out. They're aiming for St. Valentine's Day, but they might have it out by Christmas. And I go off to do another tour of the United States and Canada, and I have a lot of television coming up in the summer. And then I go off again to Canada, the United States in the autumn. I'm going to Australia next year. So
a very, very busy time. Well, thank you very much for taking the time out to talk to us, Mary. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Barbara. Thanks. My pleasure.
And now Mary's going to play and sing for us a Scottish song from the Hebridean island of Uist. It's a cattle croon which is sung while driving the cattle home in the evening.
Thank you. And now we move on to a very sensitive area and to a subject so shocking to most people, so abhorrent that they'd rather not know: incest and sexual abuse. But it's a subject that should be talked about, that should be brought into the open. It can happen even in ordinary, outwardly respectable families.
When I was 3, my father started to orally abuse me. And then when I was 8, he started to sexually abuse me, and it stopped when I was 17.
I was abused by 2 brothers-in-law who were unaware, I believe, of each other's activities. That went on all throughout my adolescence. And it took me a long time to be able to put a stop to that.
In my case, it was my father, and it started when I was extremely young, before I can consciously remember, and it stopped when I was about 12.
He'd come into my bedroom when everybody was in bed, and he'd wake me up fondling me and trying to gain some sexual experience for him, I suppose, and also trying to arouse me. I don't know what age I was. I can remember it happening when I was about 8 or 9, but I can't remember it actually starting, so I don't know when it started.
It was very difficult to make friends. I just felt I was different from the other children. I knew things they didn't know. I was worried when I was 10 about becoming pregnant, things like that. I mean, I didn't know much. I knew it was sexual. I didn't know enough, because it wasn't taught in schools in those days, to know what was necessary. I was really worried about this. That sort of thing I would have liked to have talked to somebody about, but there was nobody to talk to.
I felt very, very isolated as a child, and I can remember the excruciating loneliness of it. Not being able to turn to anyone, not feeling it was all my fault, feeling terribly, terribly guilty, because it was impressed upon me that I mustn't tell anybody. And I just felt dirty, and I felt isolated, and felt totally unacceptable in the community, at school, outside school, anywhere.
I was stealing, very withdrawn, didn't have any friends of my own age group. And when I was about 19, when I was involved with a boy, we were thinking about getting married, the effects of marriage and the thought of marriage and what I would have to take part in was just too much for me, and I tried to commit suicide.
I've been married twice, and both times I virtually said yes to the first person who asked me, because my sense of self-worth was so low that I was just grateful that anyone should ask me. And both marriages failed. The first one after 3 years. I was left with 2 small daughters to bring up. The second one only lasted a year. And of course I had additional problems as a single parent, because I couldn't let my daughters go to my parents to stay. They weren't allowed to go by themselves, and I couldn't say to them why they couldn't go by themselves. And I had to make up the excuses as well. I told them when they were adults, they know now, but I didn't see it was something that they should have to worry about as children.
People didn't know what it was, they didn't know what to do with it, and I think also there was too much emphasis put on the fact that from the outside we looked like a very normal, healthy family. We were well fed, we were well clothed, my parents were articulate, so on the whole, from the outside, we were a very normal family.
What about your mother? How did she react to this?
Well, she's still with my father, and her attitude is that it was all her fault, that she was a bit frigid and that it was all her fault. But I would contradict that in the fact that my mother married my father when she was 16, and if the participation that I had to go through with my father was anything like what my mother had to go through, her experience of sex would be similar to mine.
I went to a doctor and I went to a minister. The doctor suggested that I approach my mother, which in my case was not possible. Well, in some cases maybe it would have been, but certainly not in mine. I didn't have a good relationship with my mother at all. The minister didn't believe me. Looking back, I think he didn't want to believe me because he didn't know what to do either, which is understandable.
Did your mother know what was going on?
I think at one time she may have suspected. I doubt very much if she could have done anything because I don't think my mother has the kind of strength that would have been needed.
Well, I don't think I wanted him to go to prison or anything, but I didn't know the state of the law or anything at that time. I was just terrified to be left alone with him. I could have done with him being away from the house, but I didn't formulate it into a definite idea as to what should be done or whether he should be punished or anything like that.
When I was 12, I told the school, and they told the doctors, and they brought me home. And no one would believe it. It was a case of girls of my age live in a fantasy world about their fathers. And from then onwards, if I got close to anyone, I would tell them about it. But it was just one of these things that people didn't believe.
Disbelief is a common reaction, and many people simply don't want to know. It's just an adolescent fantasy, or something that happens within primitive tribes. But incest is a reality in Britain today. And Susan, Anna, Jane and Anne have found support and understanding in the Edinburgh Incest Survivors Group.
I was really worried. I wondered what I was going to get into. I thought I was going to see a bunch of neurotics or, or whatever.
And how was it when you did get there?
Oh, marvellous. It was a great release for me, really. After years and years and years of having this barrier come up, whenever I got close to anyone, it was something I couldn't talk about, and it had been a very big part of my life. I suddenly found I was with normal people, leading normal lives, who'd had the same problem, and if they were normal, well, maybe I was too.
There are little things that get triggered off at times that make you feel a bit uptight, and I can phone someone up in the group and I can talk to them about it. And I think what I got out of it is the fact that there is a group of people in this world that are the same as me. I'm not the outsider.
I think that kind of support of being with other women from whom you don't have to have that secret and that you can talk about it with, it means some place you can be open about yourself, and it gives you strength in the rest of your life.
It's a question of having somebody to talk to and a group you can trust and people you can relate to, even though our experiences are different individually. There's a common link between all of us, and there's nothing you have to hide.
Two of the women in that film were blacked out to protect their families and friends, but both women were angry that society's attitude to incest should make it necessary for them to be ashamed to show their faces. With me here to discuss the subject are social worker Suzanne Holden and Anne Douglas, who is a clinical psychologist. Welcome, both of you. First of all, Anne, there are lots of myths about incest, that it only happens in rural areas, in subcultures and families of low intelligence. And yet the survivors that we've just been watching on that film are obviously intelligent, well-educated people from respectable families. Are they typical?
I think they're representative. I think perhaps it's more comfortable for people to believe that incest only happens in overcrowded rural areas, but the research, and certainly my clinical experience, would say that I've seen people from every social class, and it's not confined to one.
Suzanne, you see people victims of child abuse all the time. What age do you find the children normally are?
It can be any age, from, in the most severe cases, a baby, right up to adulthood. Of the families that I know about, it tends to be either the pre-puberty child, where it starts about 4, 5, 6 or 7 and can go on for some time, or it may start just in young adolescence, about 11 or 12, and continue for some time. So in fact, there's no particular age that's particularly vulnerable. It can be at any age.
How common is it?
That again is very hard to say. You mistrust facts and figures in this area because of the secrecy. It's very hard to find out how it frequently occurs. People do feel that the cases that we do know at the moment is the tip of the iceberg, that in fact it's going on a lot more frequently than official statistics would say. In my experience, people are becoming more aware of sexual abuse and incest. Girls are becoming more confident to speak out about it, so there appears to be more cases that are coming to light in recent months.
How do you find out about these cases?
I think it varies for Suzanne and myself. I see older women, and well, from age 16 upwards. I work with women who are referred because of some form of sexual problem, and in my initial interviews sometimes it comes to light that they were incest victims, and for some of them this is the first time they've been able to speak about it. So that from my experience, it's the adults coming to see me.
And Suzanne, how do you come to hear of them?
It tends to be either the mother comes to the department, social work department, saying that her daughter's told her and she seeks help. But more often it tends to be the police. The child has spoken to a friend or her mother or a neighbour or a relative who's thought about it, and then inform the mother, and it's gone to the police, and the police then bring in the social work department.
What effect does this have on the child, though, all this investigation?
It can be very distressing initially, but the distress usually is apparent because of the sexual abuse. So the child, it varies quite a lot, but it tends to be extreme anxiety, distress, difficulty in talking about it, concern about what's going to happen, frightened about what will happen to her mother. So the child is carrying a lot of emotions, but it does depend from child to child, but generally a fairly common trait would be that she's extremely distressed and would like it to stop, and sometimes, quite often, relief, in fact, that she's eventually been able to speak to somebody about it.
And Anne, by the age of 16 or whenever you see your women, what sort of effect has incest had on them?
Well, I think the film was very, very good in that. I think it really highlighted the sort of complaints that people I see are talking about. The feeling of being cut off, the feeling of being always having been different, or the outsider. Quite often lots of feelings of guilt, the feeling that perhaps somehow they deserved it, somehow they were somehow involved, feelings of anger towards their father or their mother. Often a difficulty in trusting people in general, and men more particularly, and also more particular sexual problems. One common sexual problem in people who've been incest victims is what we call flashbacks, which is a memory of the incestuous experience interfering with their marriage or their sexual relationship.
Can incest victims go on to lead well-adjusted lives afterwards?
I think yes. Firstly, yes. I think the adjustment that incest victims will make will depend on a vast number of factors. For instance, if they had anyone around that was sympathetic to talk to at the time or since, particularly if they've been able to share the secret with anyone And moving on to the sexual side of things, if they've had an understanding sexual partner, I think all these things are very important.
Are you therefore saying that anyone in this situation should perhaps talk to people?
I think they should think about it and then talk to someone they trust.
And Suzanne, what advice would you give to people?
I would agree. I think it's important to share the information with somebody that you trust, and also for the person that they speak to, for people to believe what children say, not to deny their experience, and don't automatically discount what they say.
Well, thank you both very much indeed for coming and talking about it. And I'd like to thank all the women from the Edinburgh Incest Survivors Group who agreed to take part in our film too. I don't think it was easy for any of them, but they felt, like us, that bringing the subject out into the open was the best way of helping its victims.
I think it's important that girls understand their bodies are their own, to determine what happens to us in every situation. If somebody touches you, if somebody tickles you, if somebody kisses you in a way that you don't want, you have a right to say, I don't want you to do that to me. And if you don't get support from whoever else is around, if nobody listens to you, find somebody who will listen to you. Keep telling people, don't get discouraged. Keep looking for someone to agree that you have a right to your own life. And then some help will be there.
If you want further information about incest or details of groups in your area, do please write in to our normal address for a leaflet. That address is Network, P.O. Box, Glasgow G12 9JQ. I'll repeat that. Network, P.O. Box, Glasgow G12 9JQ. Or you can telephone 041 357 1774. That's 041 357 1774. If, however, you're in need of immediate help or advice, then I will give you another telephone number to ring. An organisation called Family Network, which is concerned with all forms of child abuse, is offering a free and confidential telephone counselling service for anyone who wants to talk about the issues raised in today's programme. The number for that, if you're in Scotland or Northern Ireland, is 041 221 6722. That's 041 221 6722. If you're in England or Wales, the number to ring is 061 236 9873. That's 061 236 9873. And I would stress that all your calls will be treated in the strictest confidence.
Well, that's almost all for now. Next week, we'll be seeing how people cope with arthritis and the various methods of treatment, from hydrotherapy to disco dancing. We'll try to find out why people avoid walking under ladders when we investigate the roots of superstition. We'll also be taking a new look at an old subject, contraception. And Vernon's quiz will be asking just how much you know about that very subject. And our guest in What Price Fame will be one of the all-time boxing greats, Ken Buchanan. So join us next week. Bye-bye.